Close your eyes for a moment and listen. It's a Tuesday morning in 1974. You don't hear the hum of a giant supermarket freezer or the beep of a self-checkout. Instead, you hear the chime of a doorbell, the sweep of a shopkeeper's broom, and the local gossip being traded over a wooden counter. Welcome back. Today we are taking a sentimental journey into the world of British shopping in the 1970s. For those of us who grew up then, shopping wasn't a chore, it was part of the social fabric. It was a time of brown paper bags, weighing scales, and a level of personal service that seems almost alien today. Before the Big Four took over the outskirts of our towns, the High Street was the true heart of the community. Today, we're revisiting the sights, the smells, and the unforgettable characters of a lost era. Let's step back in time. Every neighborhood had one. The corner shop was more than a retail outlet. It was a community hub, often open at hours when everything else was shuttered. It smelled of floor wax, firelighters, and loose tobacco. There was no browsing in the modern sense. You walked up to the counter, and the shopkeeper, usually someone who knew your parents and your school report, would fetch your items from the high shelves. These shops were the lifeblood of the 1970s street. You could buy a single stamp, a pint of gold-top milk, or a quarter of sweets from a glass jar. There was a profound sense of trust. Putting it on the slate was a common practice for families waiting for payday. It was a personal, intimate way of living that created a safety net within the terrace. While the stock was limited, the connection was infinite. You didn't just buy a loaf of bread, you exchanged news, checked on neighbors, and felt, quite simply, that you belonged. It may seem surprising today, but in the 1970s, a 7-year-old walking to the local shop with a handwritten note and a few coins was perfectly normal. Independence began early. Mothers trusted the street, the neighbors, and the familiar face behind the counter. We were sent out to fetch tea, bread, or a tin of sardines, and it felt like a small but important adventure. There was an unwritten etiquette. You waited patiently, spoke politely, and guarded the change as if it were treasure. The shopkeeper kept an eye on you, asking about school or your family, quietly making sure you were safe. It was never only about the errand, it was about learning responsibility and belonging. We would linger by the jars of sweets, debating marathon bars or Texans. Walking home with heavy glass bottles clinking in a string bag, the high street felt less like a road and more like an extension of home. Before the all-in-one convenience of the modern aisle, shopping was a multi-stop marathon. You didn't just go shopping, you visited your specialists. The butcher was a man in a blood-stained striped apron who knew exactly how you liked your Sunday roast tied. The baker filled the morning air with the scent of real yeast and flour, selling loaves that hadn't been wrapped in plastic. Then there was the greengrocer, where the seasons actually meant something. You couldn't get strawberries in December, but the arrival of Jersey Royals was a national event. There was something tactile about it, the sawdust on the floor, the heavy iron weights on the scales, and the way the grocer would snap open a paper bag with a flick of the wrist. It took longer, yes, but the quality was undeniable. You knew where your food came from, and more importantly, you knew the hands that prepared it for you. It was a masterclass in local craftsmanship. Saturday morning in the 1970s was the social peak of the week. The high street was a sea of car coat-wearing dads and mums with stylish headscarves, all navigating the bustling pavements. It was a sensory overload. The smell of roasting coffee from the local deli, the sound of a busker, and the sight of the storefront of Woolworths beckoning you inside. This was the era of the pick and mix, where we'd spend ages hovering over bins of cola bottles and foam bananas. The high street felt permanent, a collection of grand buildings and familiar names like Boots and W.H. Smith. It was where you'd inevitably bump into 3 people you knew, leading to long conversations while the kids tugged at coat sleeves. There was no click and collect or next day delivery. If the shop didn't have it, you simply waited until the following week. But in that waiting, there was a quiet sense of anticipation, a shared rhythm of life that defined the British weekend. If the corner shop was for the everyday, the department store was for the extraordinary. Entering one felt like stepping into a different world. One of thick carpets, hushed tones, and the heavy scent of expensive perfume near the entrance. These were the grand cathedrals of commerce where service was still a profession. In the 1970s, department stores were organized with military-like precision. Floor walkers in smart suits would direct you to haberdashery on the second floor or linens in the basement. Everything was displayed with an artistry that made even a toaster look like a piece of sculpture. For many of us, the toy department was the ultimate destination, a kingdom of Corgi Toys cars, Cindy dolls, and Hornby trains. It was aspirational shopping at its finest. You didn't just go there to buy, you went there to dream. It provided a sense of occasion that today's warehouse-style outlets simply cannot replicate. No discussion of the 1970s is complete without Marks & Sparks. For the British middle class, Marks & Spencer was more than a store. It was a certificate of quality. This was the era when their St. Michael brand was the gold standard of respectability. Whether it was school uniforms that lasted forever, or the revolutionary chilled ready meals that were just beginning to appear, M&S was the brand people trusted implicitly. The shopping experience there was unique, no-fitting rooms in those days. You bought your trousers, took them home, and brought them back if they didn't fit. The staff were famously well-treated and knowledgeable, adding to the atmosphere of a reliable British institution. It was the place for a sensible knitwear purchase, or the luxury of a tin of Swiss biscuits. M&S didn't just follow trends. It defined the sober, quality-driven aesthetic of the 1970s. It was the backbone of the British wardrobe and the envy of the high street. While M&S provided the essentials, Debenhams offered the experience. It was the quintessential destination for a Saturday afternoon outing. For many families, a trip to Debenhams was a multi-generational affair. While Mum looked at the latest fashions inspired by ABBA or Charlie's Angels, Dad might wander toward the electrical section to marvel at the new music centers with integrated turntables. The store felt vast and adventurous. It was a place where you could lose yourself for hours. There was a certain gentility to the pace. People weren't rushing. It was about the touch of the fabric, the consultation with the shop assistant, and the grand staircase that made you feel just a little bit more sophisticated than you actually were. Debenhams was a cornerstone of the provincial British city, a landmark that signaled you had truly arrived at the good part of town. It represented the peak of the department store's influence before the digital age changed our habits forever. For those in London or those making a rare big trip to the capital, Harrods was the undisputed peak of the retail mountain. In the 1970s, its green awnings and terracotta facade were symbols of a global prestige that felt uniquely British. Even if you only walked out with a small bag of tea or a branded teddy bear, being inside Harrods felt like being part of an elite club. The food halls were, and remain, a work of art. The tiled walls, the displays of exotic fruits we'd never seen in the Midlands, and the sheer scale of the operation were breathtaking. It was the era of the Harrods sale, when people would queue for days to get a bargain on a designer coat. Harrods taught us to aspire. It showed us that shopping could be a grand theatrical performance. It was a place where the customer is always right wasn't just a slogan, but a way of life delivered with a crisp London accent. Perhaps the most cherished memory of the 1970s shopping trip was the mandatory stop at the store cafe. Whether it was in British home stores, Littlewoods, or a grand department store, the cafe was the sanctuary for weary feet. It usually featured vinyl-topped tables, a sturdy tray, and the clatter of heavy ceramic teapots. This was where the heavy lifting of the day was discussed. You'd sit down for a toasted tea cake or a slice of Victoria sponge, accompanied by a pot of tea for two, which always seemed to provide exactly 5 cups. The atmosphere was one of hushed conversation and the gentle clink of spoons. It was a moment of pause in a pre-digital world. There were no smartphones to distract us. We simply sat, watched the crowds, and enjoyed the simple pleasure of a break. It was the reward for a successful morning of errands and for many children, the highlight of the entire week. In the 1970s, the magic of Christmas didn't start with an online ad in October. It started with the unveiling of the windows. Stores like Selfridges or the local independent department store would spend months preparing animated displays that drew crowds of families. We would stand in the cold, noses pressed against the glass, watching mechanical elves and glittering snowscapes. And then there was the grotto. It was a rite of passage. You'd queue through a tinsel-lined labyrinth to meet a Santa who usually smelled slightly of tobacco and peppermint. You'd receive a wrapped gift, perhaps a simple plastic toy, but it felt like pure gold. There was no booking a slot online. You waited your turn in the damp winter air, fueled by the excitement of the season. These displays turned the high street into a fairyland, creating memories of wonder that have stayed with us for over 40 years. It's easy to forget how analog shopping used to be. In the 1970s, the plastic revolution was only just beginning. Most of our shopping was carried home in heavy paper bags or string bags that expanded to fit everything. Milk came in glass bottles delivered to the step, and pop bottles carried a deposit that we'd eagerly collect to earn a few pence. There were no barcodes. Every single item had a small, sticky price tag applied by a handheld labeler. The cashier didn't scan a code, they manually punched the price into a heavy mechanical till. You could hear the ka-ching as the drawer popped open. This manual process meant that shop assistants actually had to know their stock. It was a slower, more tactile world. We didn't have loyalty cards. We had a regular status recognized by a nod and a smile. It was a system built on human memory rather than data algorithms. As the 1970s progressed, the winds of change began to blow. The first large-scale supermarkets names like Fine Fare, Safeway, and the early Tesco began to appear. At first, they were a novelty. The idea of picking up your own basket and walking through aisles was a radical shift from the over-the-counter service we knew. These early supermarkets felt futuristic, with their bright fluorescent lights and wide selections of tinned goods. They promised lower prices and one-stop shopping, a tempting offer for the busy modern family. We remember the excitement of seeing exotic items like Vesta Curry or Angel Delight all in one place, but this convenience came at a hidden cost. The personal chat with the butcher was replaced by a plastic-wrapped tray of mince. The era of the big shop had arrived, and while it saved time, it began to quiet the bustling social noise of the traditional high street. The 1970s were the final great decade of the traditional British high street. It was a time of transition, caught between the old-fashioned service of the past and the high-speed world of the future. For those of us who remember the smell of the coffee roaster and the clatter of the mechanical till, those memories are more than just nostalgia. They are a reminder of a time when shopping was an act of community. What are your strongest memories of shopping in the 70s? Was it the Woolworths pick and mix, or perhaps the Saturday afternoon tea in the store cafe? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more trips down memory lane. Until next time,